However, it was raining heavily and it was rush hour, so off we drove. I wish we hadn't been in such a hurry. We have both suffered from sore necks ever since. Although they are now improving somewhat, we must be the only people to be whiplashed in Southern California and still be short of money. We soon had the satellite mounted and connected. It was a joy to watch a television, sat in a reclining chair with a drink. There is a tremendous satisfaction from living in a self-built, self-sufficient house. We had no large corporation charging us an arm and a leg for our utilities. We felt very proud, and it was worth all our efforts. The magnificent view from our living room of El Diablo, lit up by the daily gorgeous sunsets, was a bonus. Similarly, the morning view of the Sea of Cortez, reflecting the many colors created by the unbelievable intensity of the rising ball of fire, made it a pleasure to get up. However, life can be puzzling at times. Sometimes you hurt the one you love, or, more relevant to this story, you have to give up the things that you strive for and achieve in order to move on. Some people can make sacrifices, and some can't. Rita and I can, for better or for worse, and work hard to ensure that it falls into the former. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Just days after our return from Yuma, a knock at the door revealed an American asking to see the house. He was a tugboat captain who lived in the San Juan Islands, Washington. He was interested in buying a home for him and his mother to use as a vacation home. He loved the place, and a deal was agreed. The only drawback was that he would like to move in within 5 days. Rita gasped. We both felt relieved we had sold it, but upset at the speed at which we had to part with it. Next day, the buyer and I drove to San Felipe, and he transferred money from his bank account to mine. The following morning, I confirmed with my bank in Canada that the money had arrived in our account and transferred the house him. Fast, wasn't it? We packed only personal effects and left the Casa furnished and equipped with most of the things one needs in a home for cooking and sleeping. We did not leave the satellite system or TV. Our friends had mixed feelings. Like us, they were happy for us to have sold so quickly, but sad to see us go, I think. Teary-eyed and emotionally drained, we drove out of the ranch on 20th March. This would be 1990-80, and headed north. The end of another era. We didn't really have too much enthusiasm for anything for the first leg of our journey. The drive to Mexicali was made with us both battling with our own feelings. I believe that the thought of all the hard work and effort we had expended in creating a real nice home in an ideal climate, and then to give it all up, really took its toll on both of us. The United States border didn't present any problems, and we hurtled through towards the town of Laughlin in Nevada. This mini Las Vegas wasn't as big, but the gamblers were there in their thousands, all trying to change their lives by hitting the big jackpot. Few did. Rather surprisingly, I managed to win enough to pay for a motel just across the Colorado River in Bullhead City. So we gambled in Nevada and slept overnight in Arizona. My winnings also paid for a good feast with $100 left over. We had no choice but to go through Las Vegas. Life was improving. Besides, I wanted to telephone my brother in England. It was now his birthday, 23rd March, and I knew there was a telephone in Sam's Town Casino. Ian was glad I called even just to let him know where we were. I briefly explained and said we'd write later. I felt so bad at taking money out of the casino in Laughlin that I put $50 back into the slots before we left Vegas. We should never had stopped. The boring trip through Nevada started once more, and we were glad to reach Fallon. The bloody snow was still falling. I couldn't believe it. Does this place ever get nice weather? It's in Nevada, for God's sake. We braved the storm and kept going. Nothing too exciting happened on this trip home, so we'll just zip up the same old route and across the border where there was no delay. It did cost us a few dollars duty for the large quantity of liquor we had declared. We arrived at our home in Banbury Green and found it just as we had left it. We did have a field mouse, which I soon disposed of to the relief of Rita, who had begun to have a great dislike of wildlife of any description. I looked at the large hole in the kitchen and remembered that we had to buy a new refrigerator. We picked up a new conventional one, which I fitted using the trim from the original setup, and it looked just fine. I continued the trim work and built the TV and satellite receiver into the cupboards in the living room. The dish had now to be mounted on the roof and aimed at the satellite. I just managed to hit the satellite between the many trees, and we got terrific reception from then on. After a very frustrating couple of hours. Please don't sigh. But we got to thinking about our vehicle. It had been many years since we had driven around in a regular sedan car. Back to the showroom. I gave the salesman $1,000 and our pickup in exchange for a 1975 Cadillac Eldorado. old but like new. It was white, with red leather upholstery, and loaded with every conceivable option. Rita wasn't too chuffed. We had also discussed the possibility of returning to the UK, and if we did, there might be a problem in selling it. She did, however, enjoy the comfort, with all its many features, of our luxury car. Ken and Marg, our new friends from last year, were the only other couple in the park at this time of the year. We joined them for a chinwag over a drink or two from time to time. But apart from those respites, it was relatively very peaceful and uneventful for the next month or so. Until I heard, "Hey, you English shit, what you doing?" I recognized the voice and the customized terminology. Our friends from Baja, Paul, and Elda were standing at the end of our deck. What a surprise! Rita flew outside and we all hugged before settling down for a drink of something or other. They explained that they had been to a wedding in Los Angeles, and instead of heading towards their home in Illinois, they decided to come north and visit us. It was about a 4-day drive. Accommodation was no problem. They had a cute bedroom on wheels hitched to the car. What good friends they are, and I still get a kick when I think about Paul's sense of humor and how much we have laughed together. We spent a very enjoyable 2 days with them before they headed east towards home. They had no sooner left when another car drove up, and lo and behold, it was Mac and Julie with Ralph and Kathy, some other neighbors from the ranch. Mac explained that he and Julie were in the north part of Washington, visiting our mutual friends with a view to spending a few days with us later that week. We booked a site for their return visit that was easily accessible for their converted bus and went off for an evening of enjoyment in Penticton. It was great to hear all the news about our Baja buddies, but sadly, our close friend Ozzy had passed away. Look after yourself, Roma. Ralph insisted that Rita and I visit them in Heartline, about a 3-hour drive into Washington state. We set a provisional date, and they all set off back, leaving us plenty to look forward to. A couple of days later, Mac's familiar Greyhound bus came rolling into the park, and we rushed to help our pals to settle in. It was a good visit, and they both fell in love with the park, and in fact the whole area. Neither of them could understand why we were both feeling very homesick for England. Don't tell me that you are surprised. This had been brewing way back in both our minds for quite some time. Anyhow, we talked this over with our surprised guests, and solved most of the world's problems before they had to leave to visit their children in Reno. After they left, Rita and I pursued the thought of returning to the old country, and we viewed everything we did from then on taking this possibility into account, but didn't let it stop us from enjoying life. The weekend came when we were scheduled to visit Ralph and Kath, so we took a leisurely drive down and found their town of Heartline. Now, I don't want to be rude, but what a shock. If I say that it was like a deserted crossroads where Kath's sister had the only business, I think that you will get the picture. The first impression was soon cast aside as unimportant. We had come to see Ralph and Kath, who came running out of her sister's restaurant across the street. We hugged and made a beeline to the surprisingly busy eating place for a slap-up feast. Our bedroom was a camper, not unlike Tracy's cottage in Baja. It was very comfy, and we unpacked, then joined our buddies for a few beers and a long chat. We sat out on the porch and discovered that the town was busier than expected, with extremely friendly residents and very peaceful. It was understood why someone would be happy to live there, but not us. The next day, they took us to see the nearby famous Grand Coulee Dam. This was very impressive and high. We declined an invitation to go to the bottom in a glass lift. They then drove us all over the area. The scenery was superb, and the canyons created by the Ice Age floods were awe-inspiring. The visit was a welcome break for us, and we appreciated Ralph and Kath's hospitality very much. When we returned to Banbury Green, we found it quite busy, as British Columbia is a very popular place for people from all over the world. A couple set up their motorhome just in front of us, and shortly after, I saw the lady lying outside on a lounger. I noticed she was wearing a neck brace. Rita and I were just about to leave for Penticton, so, being neighborly, asked if we could pick up anything for them. It turned out that they were on vacation from Germany, and I was misunderstood. They thought I was offering them a tour of Penticton. They accepted gratefully, and we obliged. I'm glad this happened, as Gabi and Matthias were a very comfortable couple of characters to be with. Sadly, Gabi was suffering from really acute rheumatoid arthritis. In fact, she had recently given up her profession as a dentist as she was so badly affected by the crippling effects of this terrible disease. Her compassionate husband had made special tools and utensils for her to carry out her everyday tasks with as little pain and trouble as possible. She was such a brave young lady. Our trip into town became a regular routine for the rest of their stay, and there were actually tears when they left. Rita and I finalized our discussions about our future and reached the conclusion that we both had a strong desire to be back with our family. That's what I meant when I suggested only immigrating if this kind of pull would never happen. You know the work involved in moving house. Try and imagine the upheaval when moving countries. There is so much to organize, let alone leaving all the friends made over 25 years or so. The cost of living in England would be higher, based on various reports, and our family would have to get to know us all over again, and vice versa. But the urge was so strong we knew we would overcome any obstacles. Even though we had made a definite decision, it was such a big one that we decided to wait another year before leaving Canada, probably for the last time. The winter was approaching, and we had to consider where we would live for this final 12 months. We booked into a motel for an agreed yearly rent, beginning the middle of August. Once again, we had to dispose of another home which we had just got to our liking. Rather than advertise, we spread the word that our trailer was on the market. We suffered the same comments from our friends here as we had battled with in Baja. Why would we leave this idyllic place? Our reply was always the same. We had to go back home to our family, irrespective of the consequences. A young couple that already had a trailer on the park bought our much larger one. The price was close enough to ensure that we recovered all our expenditures on it, but they wanted to enjoy the remaining summer months in their new trailer, so we had to move fast. Why does that always happen? Rita again did a wonderful job and sorted out all our belongings into boxes and suitcases for the umpteenth time, but it was too early to move into the motel. Where would we live then? Valerie and Glenn came to the rescue when we telephoned to tell them that we had sold the trailer. "Come stay with us," she kindly offered, so that's what we did. We loaded the car with all the items that we couldn't carry around anymore or wouldn't use, such as power tools and a host of other supplies and gadgets. Glenn would be able to use them. The new owners paid us. We showed them around and told them what they needed to know, and they were happy with all the extras we had left them. We set off west again towards the west coast. This time, it was a nicer trip. We had a lighter load than previously. We spent a delightful 10 days with our friends, and they appreciated the stuff we gave them. They have a large, beautiful home in a very convenient location, so we took advantage and visited the places we didn't have the time to see on our other somewhat hurried trips to the coast. The Vancouver area has a terrific public transit system, and we used it a great deal. By the way, I mentioned that BC was an expensive place to live. Anyway, if I didn't, it is. And that's why the residents say that the initials stand for bring cash. We returned to Penticton and checked in at the motel and unpacked. We had still got mounds of stuff, but we managed to hide it all over the spacious unit. The motel room was really a one-bedroom apartment, complete with a refrigerator and stove, even a sofa bed and cable television. We would be very comfortable here with the swimming pool on our doorstep. But not for long. On the 17th of September, we got a telephone call from my nephew Paul in England, who proudly announced the birth of his son James. I was ecstatic. The family name would be carried on, hopefully. I may have mentioned this before, but we unfortunately were never blessed with children. Sadly, Rita had to have a hysterectomy in 1972. Had we had children and hence our own family unit in Canada, we would not have moved around so much. At least that's what we say. We rushed down to Walmart and bought loads of baby clothes to send home with our congratulations and best wishes for them all. This happy event made us think again. Why are we here biding our time and our family was 5,000 miles away? You've guessed it. We decided to leave as soon as possible and immediately booked a flight for 1st October. When we rang Valerie to tell her of our decision to leave early, she asked where we were flying from. When I told her Vancouver, she didn't hesitate and invited us to leave right away and spend the last 10 days at their place, and Glenn could drive us to the airport on 1st October. We booked a cargo company to ship our 15 boxes of stuff. These were picked up a few days later. The final consideration was how the motel owner would react to us only staying 1 month. We told a white lie about a family emergency, and he was very sympathetic. We paid him for the month and checked out. Our boxes were now on their way to England, and I had sold the car. We were free to leave any time. By the way, it eventually cost more to get our boxes from London to Rochdale than it did from Penticton to London. Jacques, the mild-mannered and very well-educated gentleman from Aylmer, whom we had met at the motel, had bought our car, and he kindly drove us to the station where we boarded a tin bus to Delta. Our chauffeur gave us an envelope, which we hadn't to open until the bus had pulled out. The words he had written on a card and a short letter about our brief friendship were so touching we both had a quiet weep. The little sod had also enclosed a $50 bill for a celebratory drink. "You're a real nice person, Jacques. God bless you." Glenn picked us up at the bus station, and we were on the last but one leg of our journey home. Every day brought us closer to the day when we would have to say goodbye to this wonderful couple, but we were now getting excited, and the first of the month came rather slowly. With more hugs and gestures, we bade farewell to Valerie, and then Glenn drove us to the airport. Same goodbyes again, and he left. But we didn't. There was a technical problem with the aircraft, and we were delayed for 3 hours. The time dragged, so we spent a fortune in the duty-free shop. You remember? The place where you used to be able to buy things at a reasonable price? The announcement that the plane had been fixed was followed shortly by another one. Calgary Airport, where we had to pick up passengers, was closed due to a plane crash. That's the sort of news you need to hear as you're waiting to board a plane, isn't it? 5 hours later, we took off. Neither of us could contain our excitement, and we were fidgeting all the way to Manchester. Back to England, 1998 to 2000. Ian and Dorothy were at Manchester Airport to meet us, and we were all in a dither for the first few minutes. We collected all our luggage with no casualties. I was in an airport waiting for my luggage. The only other person there for the same reason turned to me and said, "It won't be long now. It's just going through the crusher." No wonder my little brother was smiling as we approached his car. He was driving a beautiful, brand new Mercedes. I was so proud of him. We arrived at their house, and our bedroom was all ready for us. We unpacked, and considering the late arrival, decided to go out for a bar snack. Ian drove to a favorite place of his. I could see why he liked it so much. It was so old, world, and cozy. The meal was a well-presented delight. When I asked for the bill, I got my first taste of the British prices. Anyhow, it was good to be home. I'm afraid I might have goofed when I left it until the last minute to telephone Ian to tell him we were coming home ahead of schedule, by way of a surprise. Although he was happy to see us home, he and Dorothy were right in the middle of all kinds of home projects. They had been helping both their 2 children to set up house for the past 2 years, and had postponed jobs that needing doing in their own home, not the least of which was a roof repair that had resulted in damage to the decor in the 2 bedrooms upstairs, both major jobs. It was not a very convenient time to have 2 house guests. Recognizing this urgent need to take care of their overdue projects, we suggested we stay only a couple of days and then go to stay with Rita's sister in Rochdale. Margaret and Eric very kindly offered to put us up for as long as it took to find our own place. This turned out to be a scary task for Rita and I. We priced rental accommodation, and to our dismay, the average rents were far in excess of what we had expected, and our tentative budget would be, to say the least, stretched. As a result, we started looking for a house we could afford. These too were more than we expected, and quite disturbing. Had we made a mistake in assuming we could manage over here? The prospect of obtaining employment at our ages and all we had gone through just to be able to afford a place to live was depressing. We were determined to make it work, so we plodded on regardless, and eventually found a terraced house in Littleborough. Our available capital would cover this and the necessary repairs and updates. A mortgage was out of the question under our circumstances, so we had no alternative but to pay cash. We set the wheels in motion for an early completion, and the solicitor acted accordingly. We would probably move in within 2 weeks. Meanwhile, our crates had arrived in London, and we had them transported to a carpet warehouse in Rochdale that belonged to Rita's sister Teresa and her husband Dave. The whole process of shipping them from our motel in Canada to England had only taken about 10 days. Pretty damn good, we thought. We had a comfortable stay with Margaret and Eric, who kindly run us all over the place to attend to our business. Thanks again. Exactly 1 month after our arrival in the UK, we moved into our new home. The renovations began, and the next 12 months were spent chasing all over Hell's Half-Acre for materials. This was no easy task without a car, which was a luxury we chose not to have. Can you imagine carrying 8 feet, lengths of wood, etc. on the bus? It was a good job the relatives were willingly on hand to assist with the larger materials. However, on one occasion, I had to pick up a sheet of drywall and walk from the builder's yard. It was raining, so I carried it over my head. A passerby offered this advice with a cheeky grin. "You'd be better with an umbrella." British humor. It was a very difficult time for Rita. Apart from coping with the mess of renovating, she had to handle the sadness of her brother Joe being terminally ill. Remember that Joe had a triple bypass in 1986 and subsequently retired in Ireland. It turned out that during the operation, he had been given tainted blood and was diagnosed with hepatitis C. I won't dwell on this subject, but we made several trips to Ireland until he sadly passed away on the 2nd September 1999. Rest in peace, Joe. We all miss you. We completed all the jobs just in time for Rita's 65th birthday party in November. Being short of space, we advised the multitude of guests to shower well and wear thin clothing. I was glad that I had converted the backyard into a Mediterranean-style courtyard complete with toilet and bar. An idea from Mexico was appreciated. The drum out of a washing machine made an excellent fire pit. This took the chill out of the November air and made it bearable for the smokers who were relegated to this area. We never thought so many people would fit into our small home. Maybe they held their breath all evening. We settled down to enjoy the fruits of our labor. The little house was now very comfortable, and the future looked good. We even managed to take a 2-week vacation in Southport, courtesy of the Royal British Legion. They have a convalescent home for ex-service men and women, and in their infinite wisdom decided that Rita and I needed a break. At last, it was payback time for my horrendous stint in the Army. Sadly, we returned home from our vacation to the news that my friend Keith Barlow had died suddenly on 7th February 2000. This was followed shortly after by the death of my Aunt Ellen on 17th May. Both were loved and are sadly missed. In the initial period of relaxation, after all the hard work getting to this stage, we spent long hours watching television and reading newspapers. This would bring us up to date with life in modern-day England. Unfortunately, these bittersweet pastimes generated many emotions. Along with the enjoyment of the movies, etc., came the constant reminders that we are living in rip-off Britain, and then there were the weather forecasts. Oh no, not again. We began comparing our lifestyle with the one we had just left. I should say that we have always remained as British as fish and chips, but it became apparent that our homeland was not the same place as we had once known. Our pension would need to just about double to be able to afford the same standard of living we enjoyed in North America. We agonized over our thoughts during long walks between rainstorms, and whilst watching the daily television programs about crime, road rage, flight rage, hospital rage, neighbors from hell, and other bloody depressing subjects. I guess people in England had got used to the gradual introduction of such programs, but to us, it was unbelievable. I've never seen so many negatives. There were daily instructions of how to dissect your pets, renovate your house in 2 days for peanuts, and turn a crappy garden into a tropical paradise over the weekend with very little effort. I hope you get my drift. Trying to fight off the negatives was not helped by a telephone call from good friends back in Aylmer, Bob, and Sue. Our old house had come onto the market at a good price. Due to the sad illness of the accountant who bought it, this really made us think even harder. We considered the problems caused by overpopulation, which I will leave to your imagination, escalating crime, and even the litter and dog shit that cluttered the streets. The struggling National Health Service and even people's attitude towards quality and service came into the picture. We still preferred "have a nice day" to a frown on the shop assistant's face when attempting to buy something and then being told the delivery would be several days or weeks. We had come back to be closer to our family, but we had been away too long and we couldn't adapt to the present-day English way of life. Here it comes. All things considered, we decided to return to Canada. We listed our house and spent the next few weeks filling in forms, declarations, and disclaimers, confident that the price was right and the system, such that it is, was in place and waited for some action. I don't have the space or the patience to tell you about all the cock-ups that occurred. A single guy saw the house and agreed to purchase. He finally secured the financing, and the only remaining formality to legally confirm the sale was the exchange of contracts. I should mention that the system in England calls for the buyer and the seller to sign a contract, agreeing to buy and sell respectively. These are prepared at the outset and then exchanged normally about a week before the check and keys are exchanged. Until then, either party can drop out and the sale falls through. Also, I believe that somewhere in the small print is a clause granting the solicitors the right to immediately go on vacation for the next few weeks courtesy of the clients. With the uncertainty of the sale and poor service from the professionals, it was nerve-wracking. Have you ever stood by a pot, waiting for it to boil? All the real estate agents and solicitors should be put in the aforementioned pot and boiled to a pulp. I would then throw in the property surveyor for a touch of seasoning. Here we were, scared to death to leave the house in case we missed the all-important telephone call confirming the sale. We really had to book our tickets soon to ensure that we could get seats on a suitable flight. We had also to arrange for our boxes to be shipped, as we didn't want to be living out of suitcases for too long after we got back in Canada. It was around 10th April, and we hadn't heard any news. We took a chance and arranged for our possessions to be shipped. These were picked up 14th April. It would be 3 months to the day before we saw them again. We also booked our tickets for a flight departing 23rd May. In case you have lost track of the year, it's now 2000. On 20th May, we received notification that the contracts had been exchanged, and we could pick up our check that afternoon. I am assuming that the solicitors were too busy to exchange the week before, thereby confirming the sale at least and relieving our worries. That's okay, there was no rush. We still had 3 days before our flight date. It had been 3 months since we sold the house, and we didn't even have time to wait for the check to be banked and cleared. We flew out of Manchester as planned on 23rd May. With the check in my money belt. Canada. Forever. 2002, who knows? Rita's brother-in-law, Tony and Bonnie, were waiting for us at Montreal Airport, and they kindly drove us to our temporary accommodation in Aylmer. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate your kindness. Bob and Sue made us very welcome, around 10:30 p.m. by then. We all sat up for a while, clinking glasses and getting rid of all the stress generated over the past few months. It had been a long haul arranging to return to what we now refer to as home. We crawled into bed and breathed a sigh of relief. We had pulled it off again and swore it was the last time. Although we could stay with our friends for as long as necessary, it was important to us to find a place of our own and get settled as quickly as possible. Once again, we started looking at houses for sale in Aylmer. Unfortunately, during the protracted house sale in England, property prices here had started to climb quite rapidly, and our previous house had been sold 2 weeks prior to our arrival. As usual, we had to pay cash and allow for a reasonable reserve fund, as old folks tend to do. So this somewhat limited our search. We gradually traveled further out of town and ended up finding a cute little bungalow on an acre lot, about 25 minutes drive in a small village called Luskville. Permit me to digress for a moment. The postmaster advised that the name of Luskville had been changed to Pontiac a short while ago, but added that it would probably take about 20 years for people to accept and use the new name. In an attempt to speed this up, we always referred to our new home as being in Pontiac. We always got the same response, "Where the hell is that?" Yes, we bought the place. The previous owner had built the house in 1987 as a summer home, and boy did he ever make a good job of it. He proudly showed us all around his pride and joy and explained about the well water and septic system and all the other things we country folk have to live with. Once again, I had to tell our notary, Quebec solicitor, that we wanted an early completion date.